Hi, I'm Devin from Careerified. We are not in my living room. We are in my home office. Living room's a little more occupied these days than it used to be. It's been a wild 3 months. I won't go into the details here. I doesn't really belong here, but I will say I am super glad to be back and providing weekly career tips for parents. This week, what I wanted to talk about was something that came up for me this past weekend. So, where I'm situated, one of the few things that has been open for the last couple of months is our hiking trails. And so, my family and I have made a point of heading out to the trails every weekend. And this past weekend, we happened to overhear a conversation between three adults. One of them I gathered was a high school teacher because she was venting her clearly very deep frustration with the fact that only about 3 or 4 of her students in grade 12 have actually participated in the class since classes moved online when schools closed in March. What she is particularly grumpy about, can't say blame her, is that her students now who have not so much been participating are coming to her and asking her to boost their grades a little bit. I wasn't clear if they were asking for extra assignments or just a little bit of leeway, but they're asking for higher grades when they haven't actually put in the work in the last few months. If you have a child in high school right now, chances are you are aware that their grades were essentially frozen when schools closed. Students could work to boost their grades, but they would not be penalized for not having reliable internet access, for not being able to take to online learning very quickly, or even for just, kind of struggling under the mental and physical health implications that a pandemic brings. All of that makes sense to me. When it comes to grade 12 students who are intending to go on to post-secondary education in the fall, you get a little bit into murky waters. The majority of colleges and universities in Canada have announced that their fall plans involve a whole lot of online learning. So anything that's sort of lecture style, of course, can and will be delivered online. But I think even those courses and those programs that involve, lab work or studio work or shops, anything along those lines, they've kind of shifted some of that too. So even if you say you have a student who's taking something like a millwright program, it may be that their projects are smaller, so they spend less time in lab on campus, and the timing will be distributed widely for students, so they will have less time overall. So maybe they'll be in there 1 hour each 2 days a week for the whole semester, and that's it, where before it would have been 3 days a week for 3 hours at a time. And all of that, of course, is to maintain social distancing and be able to clean equipment appropriately. The other version I've heard of this is pushing any sort of in class, in lab, in shop, in studio, those kinds of components to later in the semester. So some schools are going to be working on a model of you'll do all your coursework first, and then we'll do our labs and related assignments in the back half of the semester so that nobody physically has to be on campus until at least mid-November. Again, hoping to see calmer numbers about the virus by that time. My point here is to say that there is an excellent chance that if your child is in college or university this fall, they will be participating in online studies. And the last 3 months really gave you a bit of a litmus test of how that was going to go. If your kids sort of slacked off because they felt like they got a free pass, I've seen that a lot in post-secondary where, maybe professors don't take attendance, or maybe students have that new freedom that they're playing with a little bit. But it's really going to be a lot more challenging to maintain that workload. And so the one thing I would say is if your child struggled with it, or just doesn't seem to have the maturity or the self-discipline to go ahead with online learning, it may be time to think about how you really want to structure that fall. There's a couple alternatives, of course. A lot of schools will allow students to defer their acceptances for another year. I would think, especially this year, schools might be a little bit more flexible about that than they normally would be. And that's a question for your admissions office at your institution of choice. The other thing to think about is maybe looking at one or two online classes as opposed to the full program suite. So that might be something that could be an option to at least get your child started into the next phase of preparing for their career, without that whole overwhelm of, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can handle full-time program, full-time courses, everything online all at once. So that's my tip for this week. Take stock of how your child has sort of managed to this point and be really, really serious about whether or not that predicts how they're going to be in the fall, and take a look at what your alternative options are. As I said, I think schools are going to be a little more flexible than they normally would be on these things because it's just that kind of year. I will see you next week for another tip. You take good care.